Welcome to Incredibly Ordinary, the podcast about ordinary people with incredible stories, hosted by Lance Billings, Josh Kilsch, and Nate Reynolds from Billings Group Financial Advisors.
That ain't bad coffee, Josh.
You like that?
You ground that yourself?
You know?
He didn't want to bring his homemade coffee for you.
You didn't?
You know, still working on it. Still working on it.
He made some a week or two ago. You said it burnt, and you said it was the best coffee you've made.
Yeah, actually, yeah. I got distracted while I was sitting there roasting, and of course all the smoke started to just pour into our house, and everybody was like, "What are you doing? What's on fire?" And of course, then I thought, because it's pretty much carbon, I thought when I dumped it into the cooling fan pan, it was going to catch fire, but it didn't. And then it turned out after 3 days, I let it gas a little bit, and it tastes amazing. Yeah.
You know, it's kind of funny because one of the best smelling places that we ever hauled freight out of was Folger's Coffee in Kansas City downtown.
Yep.
I mean, you could smell the place, and then you just follow your smell to get to the plant. That was that old plant right there in that north end of downtown.
I was going to say the old downtown.
Downtown.
Well, this is the Folgers 1850.
Yeah.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Wow.
Like for Folgers, it's a really good coffee.
Yeah,
I like
good.
it a lot.
Yeah.
I know some people turn their nose towards Folgers, but I like that one a lot.
The 1850's got a good taste.
I'm not that picky, so I just whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not either, but when I get down into Louisiana and southern Mississippi,
the chicory. Oh, thank you.
Man, it can
You like
bite.
that stuff?
No,
it bites.
disgusting.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like
He made some of that one time. And he's like, you gotta try this out. I'm like,
He thinks that craft coffee that has the lighter notes to it has some other tea type flavors. He thinks that's chicory. Chicory, to me, when we were in Louisiana,
it tastes like chicory. I've had chicory before.
When we were in Louisiana,
In New Orleans.
Yeah, the chicory that was in the coffee reminded me of like a French roast, not of a tea.
It's because chicory's a pea, isn't it?
I'm
it a
not
pea?
sure on that.
But it has a really weird.
Chicory was like a bark, like a.
I don't know. I just remember
now, I
the
was
little
thinking
pastries
bark.
we
I
had.
was
Was it
thinking bark.
like the chicory tree? You mean? I don't know.
You got me. I drank
It has a weird taste to it,
Now,
though.
You've probably tried it. Now, about a year before I retired, I hauled a load of Black Rifle coffee out of Seattle down to Tennessee.
Oh.
Have you ever tried that
Uh-huh.
brand?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They got good coffee.
Yeah, I've never
They
tried
have
it.
a pretty big factory up there or warehouse, or
No, it was a real small place. I mean,
so how many years ago was this?
I've been retired 2.5 years, so
Okay,
about a
all right.
year before that, probably about 3.5 years ago.
Because I mean they're not a new. I mean they're an older company now, but they were relatively new back in the early 2010 frame-ish.
Is that
period,
right?
I think so, yeah.
Well, I never even heard of them.
I didn't know if they had a big facility up there, but
No, not where I went.
I think they're in Nashville now, Tennessee area now. I don't know, but yeah, they got good coffee though.
Actually, I was hauling that to a place in eastern Tennessee that I think it might have been another one of their facilities. You know, how you just warehouse stuff back and forth from one plant to the other and what sells in that area, you know. So, but that was pretty cool there, that Black Rifle coffee. I got DOT'd coming back. I was up right at the Wyoming-Nebraska border. It's just about dark. And I'm coming down to US 26 from Torrington, Wyoming, and I thought, no, there can't be a DOT up here in that pull-off area. It sure as a world. He's standing out there in the highway pointing this
pointing
direction.
you in, right?
And I pull in, and he goes, well, we're just getting ready to shut down. And I said, my luck. Why wasn't I 5 minutes later?
Yeah. So a DOT stop would last how long for something like that?
Well, like that, it was like 5 minutes. I mean,
Okay.
he checked my paperwork, my logbook, and he said, hey, have a good day. And again, it was one of those things, a lot of times, it's just your personality and also a little bit about, like, what you got on, because he was military, and, boy, when I said it was Black Rifle coffee, he goes, oh, man, that's some good coffee, you know.
Push you right along.
Exactly. I mean, I was the last truck out of the parking lot. They had room for a half a dozen trucks in that pull-off area. And so, you know, a lot of good things come out of DOT checks. A lot of bad things come out of it.
So have you ever pulled into one where you're just not in a really good mood that day?
Oh, yeah, I've been into several of those, too, and I used to be terrified with the DOT out in Truckee, California. That was a common one. There was some actual illegal stuff going on in some of those facilities like that. They would literally, when they're underneath your truck and trailer, checking the brakes, they're unadjusting the brakes. Now they got criminalized on some of that stuff for doing that.
What's the purpose for that?
Beats the heck out of me. Just write-ups for the state, I guess.
Wow.
Now then, the last few years I was running out there, probably 12, 15 years, I had some good friends from Reno, Nevada. They're agents for Ranger, Landstar Ranger, and they would take these big DOT guys from Truckee, come down, have breakfast, talk about, the safety aspect of it, and became good friends. And, boy, I'll tell you what, they treated me, anyhow, as going out through there, nothing but respect. But again, you've got good people and you've got bad people, and one bad person can ruin it for a whole heck of a lot of good people.
Yeah.
It's like that in any business, including the government.
Before we get too much further, we got to introduce you before we get into the stories.
I'm
and stuff.
going to scoot your mic a little bit closer.
So we've got Ron Plymell here, and we've known Ron for a little while, and retired truck driver. And so, are you from Kansas?
I'm from Missouri originally.
Oh God!
In between Nevada and Lamar.
Yeah, we're done already.
Ron, it was good having you here today. I'm glad we broke out the Folgers for this meeting.
But now my aunt gives me a hard time on this all the time because I have been a Jayhawk fan for all my life.
All right, you can stay.
If that helps.
So what part of Missouri?
In between Nevada and Lamar on Old Highway 71. So we were literally only like 13, 14 miles from the Kansas line.
Highway 71, you can kind of take that down to Springfield and...
Well, 71 was from Iowa down to Joplin, into Springdale, Arkansas, down there. And US 54 went right through Nevada, just 15 miles from where I was brought up. That'll take you to Fort Scott.
Gotcha. Were you on a farm, or was it, okay, was your dad a farmer then?
Right.
Okay.
Yep. In fact, we were just talking about the old tractor that I'm working on right now here, putting tires and wheels on it. It was my pappy's dad's dad. It's a 57 WD-45 Alice Chalmers, and I'm just getting it back up and running and everything. I don't know whether I'll ever get around to doing the paint work on it and all that, but it cost a lot of money to do that stuff.
Where do you do this just at your place, or do you have a shop you do this?
No, I got a guy there, a good friend on the west side of town there in this area there, Kane Heiner, and he's the one doing the mechanical work right now, and we just went down and got a couple old wheels to replace the wheels because the other two was rusted out.
So I've got a barn you can store that in when it's all done if you need.
I might just take you up on that.
Yeah,
seriously.
just leave the key in it.
Yeah, well, you're not going to go very far very fast.
I've got my tractor, but those old tractors are they're fun to put around on. And
so growing up, did you help farm with your dad quite a bit?
Yeah, it's kind of funny there because when you're 6 years old, you went on a tractor.
Yeah,
it wasn't none of this going out for softball, baseball, and football and all that stuff. And in fact, the little bitty town we were from, Sheldon, we lived about a mile and a half west of town. And it was so small they didn't even have football. I mean, out here, we moved out here, and you got 6-man, 9,
eight man
football. We didn't even have football at that little school. I mean, basketball was a big deal, but over the years after I left there in 1967, they went through like a 20-some-year winless basketball season at that little bitty town. Ooh. I mean, that's just cruciating on kids. How do you
get them motivated?
How big of a town is? You said Sheldon.
It was
Sheldon.
Okay. Like 400 population, about like Assyria.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then, how many acres were you guys farming?
We were farming. It wasn't big nowadays, but for that area with the little bitty tractors we had, we farmed 320 acres.
Okay.
Oh, that's a good piece of land.
Exactly.
So this tractor you're working on now, it's a WD-45?
Yep.
So,
1957 model.
Assuming it's like a 45 horsepower. Is
That, and I don't know what the straight WDs. I need to ask Dad because he'll be 98 here in about 2 months.
Wow.
And he can remember the stuff like this. So I got to ask him how much horsepower there was difference. But I think the 45 was 45 horsepower. Don't quote me, but I think the WD was like another 5-8 horsepower less.
What's the front end on that? Is it a wide or a narrow?
A narrow with the 2 tires.
I never understood how those things stay upright. I mean, it just seems.
I can tell you one. Dad bought a brand new Ford with a narrow front end, the first diesel. And it was literally the first week we had the tractor. He was disking one of our terraces.
Yeah.
And pretty soon my brother and I turn around and we go, where's he at? And we looked down there and we couldn't see the tractor, and we could see Dad on top of the terrace, and he's hollering at us. Anyhow, I got the little Ford tractor. Larry, my older brother, gets the WD, straight WD is what we had. And we grabbed log chains and we go down there, and he had laid that brand new tractor.
Yeah.
He dipped in a little hole.
I was like,
Tipped it right over.
who designed that? I understand the purpose of it, but I don't know how those things stayed upright.
Well, they don't sometimes.
Apparently.
So in a small town like that, then you mentioned, okay, you're farming a lot, which takes up a lot of time. On the downtime was just like kind of fishing in the creeks and ponds?
Oh, yeah. My pappy on Mom's side, my granddad, we went fishing a lot. Him and he took my older brother a lot more than he did us, but we fished a lot of just the riverbanks. We just work our way down where you could take the cane pole.
Catfishing or?
Yep. Catfish. Yep, just a cane pole. Yeah.
Man.
Favorite memory about that man right there, my granddad. We call both of our granddads Pappy, and that's what I have our grandkids calling me Pappy. Awesome. It was always a great deal of respect to me.
Huh. Yeah.
And anyhow, one of my favorite memories was the farm just to the south of where Pappy lived. Him and I went over there one day, and we were fishing with rod and reel then, and he hooked I don't know whether it was a bass or a catfish or what it was. It was big. It was like this long, and I tell you what, I never seen Pappy move so fast in my life. That string broke, and he wrapped it around his hand like this and went into the water pulling that fish out.
That's awesome.
That was fun days.
Wow.
That's good.
And so when did you leave? When it was after high school you left Missouri then? Or
I was
left?
a freshman in high school.
Okay.
We left in, you'll love this one. We left in 1967, Easter morning, actually Easter afternoon. We took my older brother, he enlisted in the Air Force. And anyhow, he had to leave Kansas City, the old downtown international airport. He had to leave there and go to Germany for 3 years in the Air Force. And we had all the, everything was all packed up. We'd already had a sale and sold all of, Dad had 200 head of Black Angus cattle. And that was probably the biggest money off of that farming operation was the cattle at that time. And we had the old 2-ton truck with stock racks on it. You know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
The high sides.
Yeah.
We had that thing loaded up, probably clear up to 13 feet.
Of your furniture and stuff?
Oh, yeah. And we had pickup loaded down, and we had a car, and my sister drove the pickup, but Mom drove the car. This is after we dropped Larry off at Kansas City, and we got back, and we headed to Scott City, Kansas. We looked like the Beverly Hillbillies.
That was going through my mind right
seriously.
there. That's the hillbillies coming.
It is. You literally think back now, and people watching us move down the road probably had to say the exact same thing.
What was the interstate around then, or you?
Oh no,
you're probably on Old 40 and
71 with north and south from Kansas City down through there was. It was actually concrete, most of it, because it had those concrete curbs that went up over the edge.
Yeah.
So when it rained, the water went right
Nowhere to
down
go.
the road.
Yeah.
You drove in the water, and if you're meeting trucks and stuff or any vehicle, you got over there right on the edge of that curb, and if you hit it, it would pull you over or bounce you back, depending on which way you had the wheels started. And it's kind of funny. Back in those days, I think about going up and down that road. And we didn't have seatbelts in cars in those days.
You had the arm, right?
we had,
The grandma arm.
And we had air conditioning.
That's rolling
the
up
windows down.
440, 240. Yep.
And I can remember to this day, and this is kind of the beginning of my thought of why I got into trucking, was I remember every truck we met, whoever got the window seat, we had our arm out the window and going, getting them to honk. And to this day, a lot of people warned me over the years, said, you better not honk in this town or that town. And I go, you know what? If I get a ticket honking at some little kid, I'll take that ticket every day of the week.
That's just...
So why did you guys move to Scott City then? What?
Well, okay, Dad started the harvest run.
Okay.
Him and my older brother in '64 took off, and they joined up with another guy Dad knew, and they went to Oklahoma. They cut wheat in Oklahoma, southern Oklahoma, and then up to northern Oklahoma. And then they their next stop was down at, I always get these towns mixed up, Sedgwick and Colwich. I think it was Colwich down southwest of Wichita. And they come home for a couple days when it got rained out or whatever. And then they moved on up out to Scott City, if I remember right, and then up to Nebraska. And they made like 6 stops from Oklahoma to northern Nebraska. And while he was gone, in '64, I would have been 12 years old. I was left. I had an older sister that was 2 years older than me and a younger brother that's 4 years younger. Well, at that time, at 12 years old, I was left to do all the cultivating because we had beans and corn in the ground. And what happened is I would, our neighbor right next door, like a half mile away, he'd come over and we'd either do our field or his field, whichever one had too many weeds and we needed to cultivate. And I got the best end of the deal on this because when I went over and worked on his land, at noon, we went in and had lunch. And every lunch, we had chicken, fried steak, mashed potatoes, and gravy.
Now, there's a memory.
and now, I didn't like this to start with, but I kind of learned to like it over the years. But after lunch, he said, we got one rule around here. We lay down and take a 30-minute nap.
Yeah.
I like
But for a 12-year-old,
that rule.
12-year-old kid, who wants to do that, right?
Yeah, 12-year-old kid, I'm going, oh, man, that don't
That's
sound
lame.
like for me. Well, respect your elders, and, that's the way we were
Little
brought up.
siesta.
I figured he'd have you sit down and do a Bible study or something.
No. And so anyhow, that's how it all happened. Was I was doing that at 12 years old, and I know there's probably kids out here farming right now. It probably still is a little bit that way, but look at the size of the equipment and everything, and a lot of other factors included in. But anyhow, in those days, that was something else, and then when Dad got home, I think he went 2 years like that, I think. I could be wrong. Maybe he just went to one, and then the whole family went the next year, and we had one of the neighbors do the cultivating and everything while he's gone.
And that whole, harvesting, was it wheat he was doing then? Yeah. Right. I never knew that people even did that, going from state to state, until a kid in college I knew, his dad did that. And I believe he started in Texas and went all the way to Canada. Yeah. And I just I never knew that even existed. People did that.
Well, Dad did that from 64 to 78.
Every harvest season.
And,
really?
And fall harvest, we picked a lot of corn out there in western Kansas. Almost everything was irrigated in those days. Now they've cut a lot of that water off, water shortages, and I love picking corn. That was one of my favorites.
Now, are you talking hand picking?
No.
Oh,
no,
okay.
No, with either a 6-row or 8-row corn picker,
right.
Self-propelled. And a lot of people don't realize, when I was brought up in Missouri, we had a corn picker. You hooked it onto the drawbar of the tractor, and you had 2-row corn head out here, and it threw the ears of corn in the back of the wagon, full ears of corn. You didn't have a sheller. As time went on, then they made corn pickers on the self-propelled combines that shelled the corn.
So
hold on, ignorance here. When you say shell the corn, what does that mean?
Shell the corn off the cob.
Like take the actual
just like
kernels off, essentially?
Just like you eat a roasting ear. you're shelling that corn right off that cob.
Okay.
Yeah.
So before that happened, then how did you guys shell the corn before?
Well, that's pretty interesting too, because a lot of times the horses and cattle, they would eat the corn. They shelled it with their teeth, But then sometimes, like we had an old sheller. You've seen that. Mm-hmm. You stuck the ear of corn down in the top, and then you cranked this thing like this.
And it'd pull it down?
And it pulled it down and shelled the corn.
Yeah.
So it made it a lot quicker once that machine started doing that for you guys.
Yeah, but another thing, and this tractor right here is a little bit of an example, this WD-45, but we didn't have hydraulics.
Right.
When you hooked up, and I had back problems all the way from 10, 11 years old because I wasn't smart enough to wait for help, and you'd lift these big drawbars up on these discs and plows and stuff like that and hook them onto the tractor, and you just didn't know any better. You just did it. Now, the equipment, yes, is 10 times bigger, but the same philosophy goes into with the hydraulic systems. You can get up there in the tractor and you can push this lever here, and it'll lift this up.
Just getting it all hooked up correctly. And
the GPS systems now, you literally push a button and the combine goes through the field on a straight line. Ain't none of this.
You're sitting up there just watching all the electronics, making sure everything's working.
Yep. So you didn't want to be. So you mentioned that kind of that memory of driving to Scott City, doing the whole truck horn, kind of get your interest in driving. You never want to be a farmer then after kind of growing up in that?
Yeah, yes and no. But I think as far as the actual starting, I'll give you an example on that, was after Scott City. I was 1974. I moved out to Salt Lake City. My first wife and I moved out to Salt Lake City, and we had just been there on vacation. And I was so fascinated with the big equipment in the Kennecott copper mine. You know how big those Tonka trucks are? Excuse me. The tires are as tall as the width of this room. And
that's nuts.
Man, that's what I want to do. And so anyhow, about 6 months later.
What were you doing in Salt Lake then?
Just vacation.
Okay.
Yep, okay. And went out into Oregon and back. And anyhow, I had talked to a guy that was pretty high up in management with Kennecott Copper Mines, and he said, if you're farm related, he said, we can always use good help. So anyhow, went back home to Scott City area, and a few months later, we both agreed we was going to move to Salt Lake City. Get out there, not knowing. I mean, nowadays, with your phones and even TV, if you turn it on for a split second, you'll know Kennecott Copper Mine shut down, went on strike. I get out there, and it's kind of fascinating, but things happen for a reason. Get out there and couldn't get a hold of this guy. And I started looking around for a job, and I couldn't get a job bagging groceries in the grocery store. I will give 100% support to how the Mormon people take care of their people, by all means, because their people came first. They lived there. Me, as a newcomer, I couldn't get a job. So I called an old friend that had harvested. We had known him for several years, and he had harvested for my in-laws out there at Friend, Kansas. And he goes, give me a phone number of the motel, and I'll call you back here in an hour. So anyhow, he calls me back in an hour, and he said, this is Friday. He said, can you be down here to Lake Havasu City, Arizona, Monday morning? I said, well, yeah. He said, I got you a job.
So you go to Salt Lake.
Go to Salt Lake.
And then I moved on back down to Arizona.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
How old are you during this time then?
At that time, I would have been 22.
Okay. No kids yet, though, right?
No kids.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
No. And so anyhow, we migrated down to Lake Havasu City, went down through Las Vegas and spent a day there and down to Lake Havasu.
Is that in northern Arizona?
No, it's right on the Colorado River south of Bullhead City.
Okay.
South of Las Vegas. I'll take a little chance to.
We're going to keep on having him go his coffee. That's good. Thanks.
Where's the tip jar?
Exactly.
You're getting nap points built up for you, so each cup's a 10-minute nap for you.
Servant leader over here.
So then how long were you in Arizona working for?
3 years.
And that was at the hotel?
No. I was working for the street department. Lake Havasu was not incorporated. You've probably been to Lake Havasu, haven't you, or not?
Not that I can remember.
No. It's right south of Needles, California, on the Arizona side.
Nope.
20 miles south of Interstate 40. And I was working for the street department, and another guy that worked for the water department, I believe it was. We became pretty good friends. He was older. He was as old as my dad, but we became friends. And he quit the water department and went to work driving truck. He was a logger from Oregon, done a lot of logging in his days. And anyhow, he was driving a truck, a single-axle International, 4070 International, with like a 48-foot trailer, one of them furniture vans with little bitty donut tires on the back. And anyhow, he was doing that, and I kept running into him. And I said, man, I'd like to drive a truck. And so anyhow, one day I talked to him, and he goes, okay. He said, I could get fired over this deal. He said, nobody's going to know you're on that truck because I can't take you. But anyhow, he took a chance on me. And anyhow, I would use my vacation and sick time. Most of the time, we ran out on either Thursday night or Friday night. And so I didn't work the weekend, so I didn't have to use a bunch of it. But anyhow, I made overnight runs with him out of Lake Havasu into San Francisco, L.A., Phoenix, Tucson, Las Vegas. And
did he let you drive during those times too?
Yeah.
What were you hauling?
Furniture.
Okay.
Couches, love seats, recliners, that type of stuff. And I helped him unload them too, manual labor.
Yeah,
I did this for 2 years.
Was he paying you at all? Or is this kind of like you just learning on the job kind of?
I did this 2 years. I didn't make a dime. I had to pay for my own meals.
And you did all that labor.
And I did.
This guy's loving this then.
Do you do yard work too? Or
the point is, I wanted to be a truck driver.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, can you imagine somebody coming off the street out here today and even asking them to do anything like that? I've had young kids over the last few years, and I tell them this story, and they look at me like, you weren't too smart, were you?
Even if you paid them. Even if you paid them, they wouldn't want to do it.
But it was different. I wanted to be a truck driver.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So many people out here right now,
It's
it's
cool.
not that they want to be a truck driver. They want to get paid, and there's decent money out there driving a truck nowadays. You know, when I did start getting paid a couple, 3 years later, I worked for, I think, 5.5 cents a mile.
Wow. But the fact that you were driving that route into those bigger cities, you picked up some great.
Oh, what he did
knowledge
was
on that.
he would get over Needles Mountain there on Interstate 40, and I was terrified the first time. He stayed up with me for probably an hour or two, and so he took a heck of a chance on me.
He's just like, hey, take it. I'm taking a nap.
Yeah, the sleeper was 18 inches. So when you got into the sleeper, you laid on your side. It was an experience and a half. Well, anyhow, and I don't even know how in the heck I knew this stuff because I hadn't traveled out there enough to have any idea where I was going. But he told me.
There's no GPS. You're using maps or memory.
Go to Barstow and hit Highway 58 to Tehachapi into Bakersfield and go north and wake me up when you get to the fuel pump at Fresno.
Man, I'm thinking this guy, he had it made. He's getting paid full time when you're doing the work.
He wasn't getting paid much either, though.
That's awesome.
So
you're driving a single axle tractor.
It was a single axle tractor, cab over. You know, I didn't even have conventionals until up in the 90s. You know, in the 70s and 80s, I had cab overs.
You're gonna have to.
A cab over's the flat front.
Just a flat front. There's no hood.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're
engine
sitting
sets-
right on top of the engine
Exactly.
and on top of the front tire.
And you got a doghouse. We call the doghouse. It's usually padded up over the engine. So it's
sitting right by your leg.
Yep, exactly.
Yep.
So after these 2 years of learning on the job, did he just quit working for the city then? And hey, I'm gonna get my CDL and
Well, actually, I already had my chauffeurs out there. I had to have a chauffeurs there, just driving the dump trucks and stuff there for the city.
Okay.
So in those days, all you had was a Class A chauffeur.
Class C.
Class A, I think.
Okay.
They
Yeah,
had-
C's and A's here was Kansas.
Yeah, A was.
That's right.
And nowadays, and then I can remember when they grandfathered in the commercial CDL. It was just a chauffeur's license, Class A chauffeurs is what it was originally. And anyhow, I came back in 75 and got back, moved to Hayes. Dad had moved to Hayes. And I talked to a guy there, and he goes, go down to National Carriers. He said they're always needing help down there. And I don't even know who this guy was now. I think back about it now, and I think, who was this guy? And so I go down there, and he gave me a name to talk to. Greg was the last name. I can't even remember now what his first name was. He was head of the safety department and hiring. And I went in, and it was real good. I went in, we sat there and visited for a little bit, and pretty soon he goes, you really don't have any experience. I go, no, you're 100% right. I don't have any experience. I don't even know how to run a logbook.
But I'm honest.
Exactly. And so anyhow, we argued back and forth there a little bit, talking about why he should hire me and why he shouldn't hire me, you know. And so anyhow, he goes, but you don't have any experience. I go, you know what? I'm going to tell you something. When I leave here, I'm going to go down the street to Grondike. I'm going to go down to so-and-so down the street. By the end of the day, I'm going to have a job driving a truck. Am I going to drive for you guys, or am I going to drive for somebody else? And he looked at me, and he goes, you just don't have any experience. I said, okay. And I got up and started to leave, and he goes, but. He said, I got a guy that needs a driver bad. Well, he puts me on with this guy, and this was a fleet operator. He had 3 or 4 trucks out of Whitewater, Kansas. And anyhow, so I got hooked up with him, and he met up with me there in Liberal, if I remember right. And my first load with him, one of his drivers or himself had brought a load out of Elmira, New York. It was fire hydrants out of Elmira, New York, a big company up there. We took them out and we delivered in Phoenix. And you talk about getting hit with a school of hard knocks fast in some of the stuff I did. And I think back now and I think, how did I do that? Yeah. Anyhow, we go to Phoenix. He's got a buddy in Phoenix, a friend. He said, okay, so I'm going to stay here. He says, I'm pretty evident you can pretty well handle the truck. And it was reefers in those days with National Carriers. He said, I want you to go over to Parker over here, Arizona, right below Lake Havasu, and load a load of cantaloupe for Key Foods in the Carnegie Market in Brooklyn, New York. Okay. He gave me a name to get a hold of, and I went over there, and I loaded this cantaloupe up, come back through Phoenix, picked him up. We come back to Liberal, and he gets in his car, and he goes to Whitewater, and I go to Brooklyn, New York.
And that's your first time probably to Brooklyn, New York.
I'd never been east of Jeff City, Missouri.
National Carrier, they called them the Elite Fleet, right?
Elite Fleet.
So how the heck do you navigate going through New York City with a big truck like that for the first time being there?
Be quite honest with you, I don't know. I mean, you just, again, I did run into other national carriers, and I don't think I ran into anybody that knew where this location was, but you could always get a phone number and call somebody. And I got down into this place, and there was this little old man. I still remember this. And Carol and I, my wife now, we went back to this place like 3 or 4 years later, and this little old man, he was only about this tall. I mean, maybe 4 foot tall. And he was probably 80-some years old at that time. And I pulled up out there, and I went in, checked with him. He was in charge of receiving on the dock. And he looked at me like that. And he goes, Sonny, I have half a notion to teach you a lesson. And I thought, oh, man, I'm never coming to New York again. I mean, this is just going through my mind. And he goes, you don't have an appointment, and I ain't got anybody to unload you right now. I said, okay. So I think I went out, and there was pay phones on every corner all across the country in those days. We didn't have cell phones and stuff. So I called National Carriers up, and he goes, give me that guy's name. So I told him. Pretty soon the guy come out, and he said, back it in the door so-and-so. I don't know whether they said you aren't getting your cantaloupe if you don't take it today. I don't have no idea. And it was a need-to-know basis, and I didn't need to know.
You just got on the load and get out of there.
Exactly.
So did you guys have any kind of radio system in the trucks back then?
CBs.
Okay, you still had
CB
that then.
radio,
Okay.
yeah.
Again, I think we're so used to GPS and navigation today that the art of finding your way with a map is lost for a lot of people. Were you using maps then, or was it more just like, hey, this guy told you the directions, you kind of memorized it?
I had 2 plastic container totes, probably this big and this tall, with maps. Everywhere I went for the first few years, I bought a city map for that area. And I would, it's good for somebody to learn geography. I had my boys, what happened when they were on the road, or I was on the road and Carol was raising them at home, was when I'd call and I'd talk to each one of them, and especially as each one got older, I go, Rusty, where are you at? And I told him, and I said, get your atlas out. And they would get their atlas out while I'm on the phone, and they'd find out where I was.
Help them relate
That's pretty
a little
cool.
bit.
Yeah,
It was. And all 3 of the boys have been all over the cotton picking country in Mexico, and excuse me, Jeremy, one in the Navy, was in Japan. Rusty's been all over too, and so it was probably a lesson to have an idea how to get to places.
Yep.
Yeah.
So kind of backing up then, when did you and Carol meet?
We met, I started with National Carriers, which would have been 77.
And that was when you were in Hayes, right?
In Hayes.
Okay.
And I was driving for this guy in Whitewater, and this is really a funny story here. I only made it 2 weeks, I believe, with him. And he didn't fire me. I fired myself.
Okay.
Anyhow, the first truck, it wasn't the truck that I went to New York with, to Brooklyn. I come back, and he gave me an old Marmon. Do you remember the name Marmon, the cab overs? Big M on the front of the truck.
I remember those.
Yep. They were Marmons, and they were actually pretty good trucks. He gave me this Marmon, and my orders were, I was loaded for Chicago, a load of meat for Chicago, and he goes, right before the sun goes down tonight, stop at the truck stop and get your batteries charged. I'm looking at him like,
that's not a good sign.
Why would I get my batteries charged? Well, the alternator don't work. And he said, I haven't got enough money to put an alternator on. And I'm thinking, I'm not going to get paid, am I? Back to square one. I'm working for nothing.
Wow.
Anyhow, I'm serious. I stopped. I was gone probably 2.5, 3 days. And I stopped tonight at the truck stop, put the battery chargers on the battery so I could get enough headlights to get into that location in the morning. Come back out. Next night, I charged it up again. And so I got back, and I said, this isn't working. I said, you're going to have to give me a truck that's got an alternator on at least. And I think he gave me another truck, and then there was something wrong with it too. And like about a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks at the most, I called the guy up that hired me, and I said, this isn't working. I said, you know what? Find me somebody else that's got a decent piece of equipment. And so he did. He said, okay, so I got a guy here, an old fella that's been with us several years. He said, Ed Zirkle. And he was probably in his upper 70s maybe at that time. And he was one of the best guys I ever worked for. I come back in there, got in his truck, and to give you an idea of time frame when this all happened, I left with my first load of swinging meat. Do you know what swinging meat is?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, swinging meat is quarters of beef that is hung from the ceiling in the reefer, in the trailer.
Big hooks.
Big old, some of them stainless steel hooks, some of them steel hooks. And I left with my first load of swinging meat to Safeway in Butte, Montana.
Back then, keeping them cool, is there a big refrigerator system on the, in this?
That's
These
the
are all
reefer he
reefers.
was talking about.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Reefer, yeah.
Okay.
And so I get up and I make my delivery at Safeway in Butte, Montana on my birthday, August the 16th of 1977. And on the radio comes, they found Elvis Presley dead on my birthday, 47 years ago now.
Wow.
And anyhow, so I called in, and they dispatched me. They said, okay, we got a couple loads here for you. Decide which one you want. And I said, you know what? I've ran pretty hard. I said, it's my birthday today. And he said, okay, so well, that just made my decision easier. He said, I'm going to send you down to Logan, Utah, and get a load of frozen birthday cakes from Pepperidge Farms.
All right. That's good.
Okay. He said, you can deliver them whenever you want in Salisbury, Maryland.
And keep one for yourself, right?
Well, I don't think I had one, but it was kind of coincidental.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Oh, man. So going back, how did you meet Carol then?
Okay, back to Carol. Okay, this is 77, and I drove for this guy, Ed Zirkle, and he had good equipment, kept it up. He goes, all I ask you to do is grease the truck and everything yourself. I mean, I had a grease gun, and he bought grease for me, and I would grease the truck, every couple of weeks. And if something went wrong, call me. Get a hold of me through national carriers. You'd call back to the office, and then they would get a hold of him and find out where he's at and have him call me. And but it didn't have much trouble. He had pretty good equipment. And then I'll go just a little bit further than that. Then in November of that year, I was already in the process of actually, I did get fired. Ed Zirkle, after driving for him for only 4 months, he calls national carrier, said, hey, I need you to send Ron out here to Longmont, Colorado, where he lived, or Lafayette. He said, I need to talk to him. So I get out there, and his wife's cooking dinner and everything, and everything's going good. And he said, man, I'm sorry to tell you this, but I'm going to have to fire you. I go, what? What do you mean fire me? And he goes, you're just doing too good a job. He said, I'm holding you back. He said, right now is a good time for you to get into trucking and you buy your own truck. And I said, I don't want to buy my own truck. He said, well, you're going to have to because I'm going to fire you.
I was going to ask you if you ever were owner-operator. So.
Yeah. And so anyhow, I called Dad up and I said, and Dad hadn't met Ed, but anyhow, I told him, I said, well, Ed's firing me. And he goes, what for? I said, he told me I was doing too good a job. My dad's just shaking his head. You could tell that.
Yeah.
So anyhow, he went right to work. And he went down to Dunans and Great Bend. He went down to Kenworth down in Wichita. And
yeah.
He called me up that night there, or left me a message, and I called him up, and he said, I found you a brand new 1977 Kenworth cab over, of course, with a 350 Cummins and a 14-speed Spicer. And that was an odd transmission, but it really became quite a transmission for what we used.
Because there's nothing automatic at this time yet, right?
No,
Everything's still, okay.
There's nothing automatic. Well, no, I take that back. Ed Zirkle, the one I drove for, he had a, what was that truck? Not Western Star, not Marmon. There was another brand there. Autocar, wasn't Autocar. There was another brand. Anyhow, he had a 74 cab over with a 5-speed Allison automatic.
Really?
5-speed. I mean, that was scary going down the mountains, I'll tell you.
I was going to say, that's
12, 13 speed automatics, you can gear them down, and with the systems nowadays, with the cruise controls, you don't even use brakes. I mean, they'll set that cruise control, and them Jake brakes will hold that truck at 30 mile an hour.
Have you ever lost brakes going down a mountain? You always see the runoffs.
Yeah, not that I had to take a ramp, but I've got them pretty cotton picking hot at the bottom and smoke roaring out the back. Rusty just called this morning. He said, I passed a truck this morning going down Floyd Hill out here in Denver. He said the smoke was rolling
through.
So anyhow, now we go on. And so anyhow, Dad found this Kenworth, and I think it was $34,000.
Not bad, but
Yeah,
that's a lot of
brand
money.
new truck. But that was a lot of money.
That's a ton of money. I was going to say, that's a ton of money back then.
You could have bought a house back then for that.
Exactly. And so anyhow, Dad says, you want to talk to national carriers, see if they'll lease you on? And I talked to them, even though I'd only been with them like 5 months. And they said, yeah, we'll take you on. You've proven yourself a hard runner and everything. And so I leased my first truck on, and Dad and I went together to start with. And then in that spring, Dad and Mom bought their own Peterbilt, and then I paid him off what he put in on the truck. I paid him off, and he bought a brand new Peterbilt with a double bunk. He had the big bunk on him where two of you could sleep side by side.
Not 18 inches, huh?
Not 18 inches.
Was your dad driving too then?
He was driving with me there for a few months, that first winter of 77.
Gotcha, okay.
And anyhow, then right after that, it would have been on into 78, after Dad got out and bought his own truck. I had met Carol out at Hayes. She had just finished up college. And so anyhow, one thing leads to another, and I said, you got a job? She said, well, not really, other than working. She worked at Hardee's. That's what part-time jobs were in those days.
Cinnamon
Hardee's,
raisin
McDonald's.
biscuits from Hardee's, right?
Exactly. And so anyhow, I said, you know what? You want to learn how to drive a truck? I'll take you on the road with me. And so I got a hold of
That's a hot date right there.
Oh, yeah. I got a hold of National Carrier. So, well, I don't know whether we can do that. And I said, well, you know what? Let's put it this way. I said, I proved out to be a good deal. I said, what do you think about her? Well, I don't know. This is that same guy.
No experience.
No experience. He goes, well, I said, you know what? I've talked to some other guys out here, and their wives and girlfriends are out here, and you gave them a learner's permit to learn. Well, yeah, but that's. I said, now, it's not any different. I said, at the end of the day, I'm either going to have Carol over here, and I'm going to teach her how to drive, or I'm going to take the truck somewhere else.
We'll go down the street.
No. Exactly. And so it's kind of funny how things go in circles like that, and you know, sometimes you don't know how your word's going to come across.
Yeah.
Sometimes you could have been said, "See you later." So anyhow, that's how Carol got out there. And
so she was driving with you then for quite a while, or how many years was she on the road with you
about
for?
5 years.
And then kids started coming in,
Yep.
and that's okay.
Yep. She went back into what her degree was to teach science, and she taught in Ellis for 2 or 3 years, 4 years, and then she stayed home for a couple years with Rusty and Jeremy, and then Aaron. She went back to teaching, but anyhow, I taught her how to drive, and it was kind of coincidental too. Things happen, and you look back and you think, why in the world did that happen that way? But anyhow, we were coming out of Statesville, North Carolina, and I can see this as clear as a bell. I had put a kink in my back, and I was in pain. It was just like sitting there, and you just constantly trying to stretch yourself out. And I got up through there right north of Statesville, and there's a pretty good flat spot for probably 40, 50 miles, and then you got a grade to climb up into Virginia, cross into Virginia. And I remember Carol was sitting over there on the other side, and here's this big old doghouse about that wide, and I said, okay. I said, it's time you learn how to drive. And she crawls over the doghouse. I hold the steering wheel. She grabs the steering wheel, and I crawl back on the other side. She couldn't even shift gears.
Well, as long as you're rolling, you're all right.
Well, yeah, exactly. So anyhow, that was her first experience of driving a truck right there. And we're going, and I know you've heard the name of this town, and it's a little bitty place in nowhere north of Pittsburgh, but it's amazing. There's a little college there, and you hear about it on the news off and on, Slippery Rock, Pennsylvania. You ever heard of it?
No.
You haven't? No? Oh, there's stuff out there. So anyhow, we deliver, and we go up to Slippery Rock to pick up a load, and anyhow, Carol's sitting on the other side, and the road is so narrow. And every time I meet somebody, I have to hang. You got dual tires on the tractor and the trailer. You got those duals. And so anyhow, every time I'd meet a car, I'd hang one dual off of the pavement.
Oh my!
It was so narrow. Well, the good thing was that truck had what was called center point steering on the steering axle. So the steering axle was about 6 inches further in.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so anyhow, I'm just doing just fine. And we get up there and we load and we started back down. She did pretty good going up. We come back down and we saw a little burger joint at the bottom of the hill over here, a few miles down the road. And I'm driving down through there and pretty soon I look over and I go, "You still hungry?" And she goes, "No, I'm not hungry." She wasn't feeling good because
all that.
You're driving on the edge of the road.
God. Man.
So much all these years driving, ice, snow, some crazy runs on any of that, or
Probably one of the craziest ones. both the most enjoyable time of driving, I think, and the scariest time of driving. Both was out west. I'll start out with a good one. It was probably 10, 20 below zero, and I was going over Monarch Pass going toward Gunnison.
Oh, yeah.
You know where I'm talking about? And that's a pretty good pass
I've
there.
been down that a lot.
Yep. Okay. I'm going over Monarch Pass, and the moon's, you didn't need headlights. It was,
oh, wow.
And it was completely snowpacked. And, I mean, I didn't chain up or anything because the snow was so cold.
Yeah.
And I had a good load on.
It was just kind of crunchy.
Tires.
And
yeah, crunchy. Yeah, exactly. And so, anyhow, I'm driving along, and I go, man, I love this. And most people would be terrified, you know, driving on nothing but snow-packed highway going over this pass. And so that was probably one of my better experiences.
Well, it's probably a really just cool with the moon,
that's
all the snow and the mountains and everything.
Pass and all the way down into Gunnison. Yep. Oh, that's a beautiful drive. Yep.
Are those 2-lane or 4-lane then?
2-lane.
Okay, so that's all 2-lane still.
Yeah,
okay.
Even the passes like that, I don't think, probably nowadays they probably got passing lanes on them. More than likely. I haven't been over Monarch for years, but probably the worst experience in all my years is thinking this could be the end of it, was I was going up north of Ellensburg, Washington, and I was going north up toward the Canadian line to start picking up a load of apples. And when you picked up apples, it was kind of strange because they would load them at so many different customers, and I was going up toward the Canadian line to get my first pickup, and I had 5 or 6 pickups coming down the valley down through there. Wenatchee, you've heard of Wenatchee, with apples, big apple capital of the world. And I'm going up, road's fine, starts snowing a little bit, no big deal. And I'm going up what's called Blewett Pass. Well, it's got a name there for a reason because I blew it on Blewett Pass. I get up there, and this truck's down to a crawl. I'm empty. And I got my power divider kicked in, and I'm going just fine. And the next thing
you're empty, though.
I'm empty.
Yeah.
Next thing I know, I'm spinning out. And I'm going, oh, no. Well, anyhow, when I got stopped, okay, I got chains. Time to get out and chain. No, the truck's going downhill.
It's sliding.
It's sliding.
Is there snow on the roads then?
Oh, yeah,
Is that,
it's snowpacked completely, and here's a drop off on this side, and then high side over here.
So you have your dualies kicked in, and you're just spinning all of them. Okay.
Yep. I spun out. I just stopped, and the minute that I stopped, I started sliding backwards. I thought this isn't good, and so the guy that I just passed, he was evidently loaded. So when he stopped, he didn't slide. He had the weight on there that evidently he was all right. I passed him going backwards down the hill.
Oh, my gosh.
I mean, I'm literally looking in the mirrors like this and steering, and I go past him, and I think one more truck I passed going backwards. There's cars coming toward me. It's like, this isn't pretty. When it all got ended, when I got down like around a curve kind of, and it flattened out just enough that I was stopped, and of all the trucks and me and the cars coming toward me, nobody hit anybody.
That's amazing.
But I tell you what, the worst thing was a snowplow pulled up with the chains and the salt and everything, and he looked at me and he goes, "Where in the hell are you from?"
They'll give you a fine, won't they? If you don't have the chains on.
Exactly.
So on the is there guardrails in the drop off there?
I think there was a guardrail on that.
Would it have done anything if you would have hit it?
Well, you could have knocked the guardrail out.
I'm saying you would have probably just gone right off then.
You don't know.
You get a truck like that empty, you're just
exactly.
Yeah, you were picking up
traction.
momentum too as you were passing.
Yeah. Well, I didn't gain that much speed because I tried to keep it in gear to where, I tried to just keep testing the brakes and everything and try to keep it in gear to try to hold it back. I mean, I didn't get to going that fast, but it's just a matter that you're not stopping. You stopped and then you went backwards.
Man.
So is this still driving that original Kenworth that you bought?
That was driving that 77 Kenworth at that time.
So how many miles did you put on a truck before you trade?
That one, we didn't put that many. I think it was about 450, 500,000 miles, which was not a lot of miles. A lot of guys at national carriers, they traded trucks every 2 years because there was a lot of man and wife operations out there at that facility. And anyhow, a lot of those man and wife teams, we didn't run that many miles. We ran up to 200,000 that area. But a lot of those man and wife operations, they would run 300,000 miles a year.
That's just getting after it.
Just driving.
Oh, yeah. We had some friends from, what was the name of that town? They were from up by Lewiston, Maine, and Larry and Sandy Moreau. I can still remember their names. We went skiing together with the owner of the company and everything. In fact, anyhow, they would leave Liberal, and I mean their truck would run. It would pull a load 85 mile an hour down the road, and when they went home from Liberal, it was about 1,600 miles to Maine. They'd be up there in a little over 24 hours.
So the routes you took then, was it like the same route every week, or were you just kind of going anywhere, everywhere?
We went everywhere.
Wherever they can find a load?
Yep. Well, and most of the time with national carriers, they tried to get you back into Liberal every 2 weeks to handle that flow of meat products. Okay. That was their product. All the other so-called backhaul loads, were just to try to get you back here. Sometimes it wasn't possible.
They wanted you to run on a profit.
Yep,
exactly. Having someone to bring back.
So pretty much you've touched every 48 states, then trucking.
Carol and I both. I mean, I don't know whether she ever went to Canada with me. I don't believe so. I've traveled all the provinces across Canada, from British Columbia to Quebec. I've never been on up into Newfoundland, but I've been in all of those across there. I'd say probably the most traveled one that I've traveled is probably Alberta. I went to Calgary a lot.
So do they go up to Alaska from the lower 48 to deliver and haul?
One of my buddies, and he's still trucking, he's like 80 years old, and he's took loads to Alaska several times. Man. Yeah, clear on up around to Fairbanks. I'm talking about the high side up there.
So a while ago you mentioned the swinging meat.
Swinging meat, yep.
I mean, that stuff's just hanging.
Yep.
And you don't make any quick movements on that, do you?
I mean,
that could just rock the whole truck.
Yeah, exactly. And I've had several experiences with the swinging meat. Probably one of them I left like 8 or 9 o'clock at night out of Liberal. It was probably 8, 9 o'clock at night, and I had to load on for Safeway in Oklahoma City one night, and I got tired. And I got down by Watonga, Oklahoma, and on this one stretch of road there, you had the highway here, and the ditch was just flat right out across there, and then the fence would be out there 50, 75 feet. And I come into that curve there, and I mean, it wasn't a sharp curve, but when I hooked it like that, I thought, oh, man, this don't feel right. And that swinging meat just kept shifting me to the side. I literally drove out into that sand and brush, no trees or anything, until I was right to the fence before I could get it back down completely stable and get my speed down and bring it back on the highway. I probably was running 70 mile an hour, I imagine. I mean, speed limits in those days were 65 on the 2-lane highways. And I probably was down to probably 35, 40 mile an hour.
Jeez.
And got her back up on the road, and I was awake then.
Yeah.
So have you had any instances of road rage of people around you? Any kind of...
No, not so much intentional road rage. I mean, probably one of the biggest reasons I retired from running over the road was I got tired to the point where I had one accident in 47 years.
I was going to ask you about your...
One accident.
And how many miles in your career, if you were estimating?
I would say legal miles, 6 million, probably.
What do you mean by legal miles? Log miles.
Yeah, we logged a lot of times. Even when Carol got off the road with me and stayed home teaching and raising the kids, I ran a logbook for her for a few years.
That's the legal miles.
And so, but anyhow, no, I forget where I was going on that. But
you said you had one accident in 47 years.
Okay. And this was right early on, and it's a typical example. I think most companies will agree with this. The first couple of years of driving a truck or car, either one, with your kids, the first couple of years are crucial. If you can get past them, then you don't know where you can go to. But anyhow, it was in 1977, right? Dad wasn't with me. He was at home, but I had went to Boston and I was going into Salem, Massachusetts, which is a suburb of Boston, and I was going in on these little bitty streets, and it was late at night, and it was wintertime too. It was cold, and I keep looking in my mirrors. Your whole thing is keep looking in your mirrors when you're going slow and make sure nobody's behind you, right? Okay. And so anyhow, I'm driving down this little street, and I'm looking for GTE Sylvania. It's a light bulb plant. I can still remember this to this day. And all of a sudden, I'm driving like this, and I'm looking back in my mirrors and don't see anybody back there. And literally right there, I spot this little sign about this big, says GTE. Multi-million-dollar company.
A little sign.
Billions nowadays. And I'm thinking, why couldn't you put a bigger sign than that? I literally, and the driveway was so narrow, these streets were narrow, the driveway was so narrow that I had to back into it, jackknife into the truck to turn it that way, and I backed up 3 foot, and I backed up 3 foot over this car. This lady had been tailing me for I don't know how long. It's dark. I didn't see no lights back there. So I get out. I thought, man, what the heck was that? I get out, and I walk back there and hear her hood, instead of being that long, it's about this long.
And her eyes are this big.
Oh, yeah. Well, it gets worse. She goes, oh, my dad, his neck is hurting. He's got a neck brace on. She just picked him up at the hospital. God, this isn't pretty. This isn't pretty. So anyhow, a cop finally shows up. And so we go through all the paperwork and everything, and I call national carriers, and anyhow, they say, okay, we'll get back with you tomorrow, and blah, blah, everything all right, and on the trailer and everything else. And I said, oh, yeah. And
the trailer's there, so that's
yeah, the trailer was theirs. And so anyhow, I go in, drop that trailer, grab a loaded trailer, light bulbs, and come back out. And this went on for probably at least a year before they settled on it. And you're going to love these numbers because this was a lot of money in those days. Nowadays, it's nothing. They paid them people $150,000.
Dang.
Yep.
Wow.
And that was 77?
Yep.
That's a chunk of money. Again, that's a chunk of money back then. Yeah.
Yep.
For just backing up into
Because
it.
they were self-insured, you know.
Yeah.
And
they just hired up the right lawyers. What they
oh
did.
yeah, exactly. So that was the only accident. You know, I went on from 77, and I just been driving 6-8 months. So it's a perfect example of when accidents are going to happen with inexperienced drivers.
Yeah.
Even though I felt like I was probably a good driver for that amount of time, still nothing replaces experience. I mean, I'm a perfect example of that. I had an old man. I was out in Salinas, California there one day waiting to load produce, and I still remember this guy. We're standing out there in the restaurant. There was another driver with national carriers, and we were talking, and we were just a couple young pups in our 20s. And this old man looked at me, and he goes, Sonny, he says, I've already backed up more damn miles than you'll ever drive forward. I stayed out there 47 years just to prove him wrong.
Yeah. If I could remember that guy's name, I'd call him.
But the point is it made a lot of sense later on in life, is half of these drivers can't back up today. And he's right.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
I used to go down to Wichita to pick up a load of dry ice every Wednesday. And a guy'd pull in from Denver, and he had just a big old conventional tractor, and he had no idea how to back.
Yep.
And I'm sitting there waiting on that ice. I said, hey, I'll back it in. And he'd pay me to back his truck in. I'd back it in, get out, and he'd, whatever it was, and enough to buy lunch.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's an easy lunch every time I go down there. So he'd pay me every week to back his truck in. And
no joke.
They'd unload the ice, pull it out, and I'd back in and get my ice and hit the road. So
when you drove, you were more of like a day-to-day operation.
We were
right?
LTL. We had local.
So you were
routes.
home. You were home every night then.
Oh yeah.
And you were on the road pretty much for the entire week. Is that, or what kind of what did your weekly schedule look like? Was it you pick
with
up
national carriers? You could never tell. I mean, I kind of put a time frame of we changed oil every 12 to 15,000 miles, and you got to realize that went by fast. 2.5, 3 weeks.
Yeah,
you got to change oil again.
Yeah.
Well, I done my own maintenance on the truck other than warranty stuff, And so I had to get through Hayes, excuse me, in order to change oil. And I mean, I could have done it on the road, but it cost you a lot more money.
Yep.
And so anyhow, normally Carol and I would spend about 2.5, 3 weeks out, go home, take 2 or 3 days off. I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but you kept rolling like that. It just
So you were pretty much on the road 2 or 3 weeks straight then,
Yep.
going place to place.
You're
to
not
place
making
to place.
money unless you're rolling.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
And so you said you were driving for 47 years.
I started driving doing that where I did get paid, and I didn't even know how to operate a logbook. That was in 75. And so I retired in
21? 22?
Who'd you retire with?
I retired from Trans-Service Logistics out here doing the batteries with Exide. And I
Yep.
was, that was probably the best thing I ever did was I sold my own truck and started driving for a company.
Yeah.
And as you know, part of this story here was then I built up my Social Security.
Yeah.
And that's
Otherwise you're self-employed. And
oh, exactly. Yeah. You tried not to pay taxes. That was the whole goal. And I still remember coming in here talking to you there right before I was 66. And we were talking, and you said, and I told you before, and then finally you looked at everything, and you said, man, he said, how old's your dad? Well, Dad's still alive. He'd be 98, 2 months.
Wow.
That's awesome.
His dad lived to 95. His mom lived to 93. Mom's mom lived to 93. And I said, I can't retire because I haven't got enough money. Okay? I didn't save like I should have, but again, we enjoyed vacations as a family and stuff like that. But, so funny, you go, you know what? You better work another 2 or 3 years. And look what it done. It did pay off. It was smart.
It was a good move.
Exactly.
But driving with those guys, you're driving their equipment.
Exactly.
You're hauling batteries, which is a good load.
Yep.
And it's low to the ground.
Yeah, and the thing is, I mean, in 20 and a half years with Trans-Service, in that period of time, I was never gone on a weekend.
Yeah.
I would get home either Thursday or Friday morning. I was home till Sunday morning or Monday morning, most of the time Sunday. I'd leave again. And it's so funny because my trucking experience, real experience, I think, started in Brooklyn, New York. And it's so coincidental, like I said, the way things turn in the world and everything and how things happen. And with Trans-Service, at one time, for about 8 years, I went to New York City every week, 48 weeks a year.
And
wow.
you were only doing Exide batteries, right?
Batteries over,
Bring
junk
back.
batteries back to Muncie, Indiana, to make more batteries out of, either plastic or lead back to Salina to make more batteries.
Dang.
And I mean, and I did that, like I said, I got to looking in my notebooks from year after year after year, and I counted them down. I'm going, God, I didn't know I went to New York City that much. and after it was about 3 years solid, I went 48 weeks a year to New York City.
Goodness.
And everybody goes, how do you drive to New York City?
Did
And
you
not
like
have
that,
accidents?
though, knowing every week this is going to be my route instead of
No, it was different stops, though.
Oh, it was. Okay.
Yeah,
All
it
right.
was. I say New York City. Most of what we delivered, we had an account with Parts Authority back in New York City, and they had, I don't know how many stores in Long Island,
Okay.
New York City, Washington D.C., Baltimore, but I had a choice because I was on the top of seniority of the New York City chain. And I would train drivers to go in there, and I'd give them all these directions and everything. And probably the last thing I would tell a driver, we would all not necessarily run all the way from Salina to New Jersey, and because it's a little bit over a 2-day trip, 11 hours, and then you had about an hour and a half, 2 hours left to get into the city. And the last thing, I remember Casey, another buddy of mine, we'd sat here at the dinner table tonight, and we'd all have our stops laid out here on the table. I didn't. They had theirs. I'd have 3 or 4 guys out here on the table, and they'd ever had this store, that store, that store. And I would tell them how to get there. And probably, a lot of bad ones. But anyhow, the one I remember the most specific, a good friend that didn't do what I said. I said, okay, your first stop is Long Island City, New York. And I said, this is how you go in. and you go around the block here, this one-way street back here, you come back out the same way. Well, he was pushing, he was nervous, and he wasn't a young kid. Anyhow, his next stop was right up here, like about 10 miles in Bronx. Well, he asked a kid at the store that probably rode a bicycle to the store, what's the best way to get up there to the Bronx from here? Took him up that way, topped the trailer out.
Oh.
Tore the top of the trailer out, hit an overpass.
I was going to say, it's
not uncommon. A lot of them did it. I never did do one.
It'd be easy to do, though.
It could be easy to do. The only thing I ever said was each one of these guys, I had 2 guys do that, and I go, what's the last thing I told you?
Yeah.
Go out the same way you come in.
You know you're safe.
It's another perfect example of what works, don't fix it.
We've taken down some power lines before, but mainly in the summertime when they get hot and they sag a little bit. That's a sick feeling looking behind you.
I'll see them swinging behind you.
Between your cab and your trailer. That's just not a good thing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, between 77 up until like 22, that's a massive change in technology in the trucks then too.
Oh, it really was. I mean,
was it a lot easier to drive in the later years and a lot more efficient?
Yeah. I think so. A lot easier on the body and the whole works. And the last, before I retired in 2.5 years ago, the last 2 trucks we had were automatic transmissions. And I'll tell you what, I can remember to this day the truck right before those 2. They were Peterbilt's, and they had 13-speed transmissions, which is fine. But they had one of the hardest shifting. The clutch was so hard. It was like a double-duty spring on that clutch. And I would go into New York City and Long Island, and pretty soon, I mean, my knee hurt so bad that I'd have to take it out of gear at the stoplight and stretch my leg out. Yeah. I mean, it's like, my God, this clutch. And so anyhow, then when we got the automatics, and this one location that I went to on the island was you went into New York City and down to JFK International Airport, right on the south side of Queens, and you're going south down the freeway here, 678, I believe, if I could be correct. And you're going straight down here, and you see JFK International Airport, and you turn, and you go up this Sunrise Boulevard here, and here's the great big 747 sitting out there. And anyhow, then you go 11 miles across this highway right here, which was a 4-lane and 6-lane at some points, but it's just like stoplight after stoplight after stoplight. You know, I mean, some of them were probably a half mile apart.
But clutching that entire time would be excruciating.
I mean, I tell you what, I tried to actually count one day how many stoplights I went through on making my 4 or 5 stops. Well, I lost track of it. You just got distracted with traffic and people and everything. And believe it or not, in all those years, I never once felt like somebody was threatening me, robbery, anything like that. But, again, when you go into those cities, it won't always work because right now I think it's a different story. Mind your own business. Don't get nosy about what people's doing. Carol and I went into this one place with a load of meat one day, and it was in Jamaica Queen, New York, which is not a good area. And we went in there, and the streets, these are still the same old streets, narrow streets. It's one way. And the weirdest thing is I stopped out here on the main street here and set my 4-ways on, and I walked around the corner, and I said, okay, I got some meat for you here. And he looked at me. He said, where you at? And I told him, and he said, okay. He said, back around this corner and into the dock right here. And I looked at it. I thought, my God, I got a cab over with a 42-foot trailer. And, I mean, it's like every inch you're going to have to take. And I said, that's a one-way street going this way. Is that a problem? I go, well, I guess not if that's the only way
that's the way to do it.
And so, anyhow, we backed in there. And the guy goes, okay, so I got another truck in front of you. And he says, this is like 5:30 in the morning probably. And he goes, are you kids hungry? And we said, yeah. He said, well, there's a diner just down the street about 2 blocks. And I'm talking about Jamaica Queen, New York. And we go down there, and I love these diners. You've probably been in New York City, and you understand what I'm saying. The diner is only about this wide right here, 18, 20 feet wide, and it goes all the way from that street to this street.
Wow.
Have you ever been in one like that? It was really fascinating. And I'm going to have to say this, but I'm not racist. We were the only white people in this diner. And we kind of looked at each other kind of like, I don't know about this. And then we thought, you know what? Mind your own business. We got a fantastic breakfast. Nobody bothered us. We walked back down the street, get in her truck, and everything was fine.
So you've been fortunate. I'm sitting here hearing all your stories. The two of you been married for how long?
45 years this year.
And she drove with you for a number of years.
About 5 years.
And so you've been fortunate to have someone strong at home as your support. And
again, back to the retirement, if she wouldn't have been the pusher on the money and made sure, and this is another thing that to me was a big factor in retiring, is you have to have your house paid off.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's peace of mind with that, right?
That is a number one, and that was a peace of mind, even though your taxes keep going up, but we can't change that, you know?
But you know, you had her, you knew she was taking care of the house.
Exactly.
You're out doing the job, and she was teaching.
She was teaching too.
But that's a team.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you're fortunate that you had that strength at home. And
well, she's the good side of it, and the bad side of it is I didn't make a lot of stuff. You know, I got home and I went to different plays and stuff for the kids and stuff like that, the three boys, but I still missed a lot.
Sure.
Yeah. And so actually by the time I got off the road as far as selling my own truck, I still was over the road with Trans Service. But, excuse me, Rusty, that would have been in 2001, 9/11 is when that was. Rusty would have been a sophomore in high school.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Jeremy would have been 8th grade. Aaron would have been 6th grade. And, you know, even at that, I was able to get home and make most everything.
Yeah.
But the weekends still go by pretty fast.
Too
but
fast.
it's no different than any job you guys.
You're still out of your house all day.
You don't get to everything of your kids.
You don't.
It's almost next to impossible.
You mentioned 9/11. I know with TSA and airlines, that changed a lot. Did that change anything impact-wise on the trucking industry and how it affected security to you guys at all?
Oh,
or
yeah.
Did it really?
It made a lot of difference, I think.
Well, just delivering to military bases.
Oh, exactly.
That changed that.
Yeah,
that
I went into a lot of military bases before 9/11 with my own truck. I hauled a lot of loads out of Fallon Naval Station out in by Reno, and I would go right down to the ports there, to the aircraft carriers in Norfolk.
Yeah.
And I just found it so amazing because it really wasn't that big a deal to get through security. You know, probably afterwards. Now, I didn't do that with Trans Service, but I got down there. I was unloading duffel bags and whatever I had on, and I was sitting right between the Stennis and the Eisenhower, if I remember right. And I asked the guy in charge, I said, you know, I had a little bitty old 8mm camera. Is that what they were? The little bitty ones, throwaway.
Oh, yeah.
The little disposable kind?
Yeah, disposable type. And I said, do you care if I walk down to the end of the pier and just shoot a picture of my semi? I'm talking about a conventional semi with a trailer, 53-foot trailer. I was about 73 feet long. I said, do you care if I walk down there and shoot a picture back? And he said, walk down there, do it, come back. No Mickey Mousing around. I said, okay. I go down there and I take a picture of this thing. And it's like a Tonka toy sitting here between these two aircraft.
Do you have that picture still?
Probably somewhere.
Man, if you could, that'd be kind of cool to see that.
Need to see.
Yeah.
I mean, you're driving a big piece of equipment that looks like a toy.
It looks like a toy.
So in all the years of driving, then where have been your favorite places to, whether it's deliver or just you've gone back to vacation wise in the U.S. that you?
Well, something we were planning on doing this year before Carol broke her femur. We were planning on flying out to Portland and going up in where Saint Helens blew its top.
Mm-hmm.
We were out there. Carol was driving. We had loaded at Albany early in the morning. I mean, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, if I remember right. I might be off on my time. It might have been afternoon. So anyhow, I got east of Portland there to Troutdale, And then you travel out through by the river there. What's the big river?
Columbia. The Columbia River?
Yeah, that'd be the Columbia coming east and west off of 84. And anyhow, I jumped back in the bunk. Now, we've got a big bed in the bunk in those days. And so anyhow, I jumped back there and I passed out. And she's driving along, and pretty soon she goes, Ron, what's going on? So she said, get up here. She said, I don't know what's going on, but she said, it's getting dark. I said, well, what time is it? I thought maybe I'd slept 8 or 10 hours, and she was in Idaho or Utah. And so anyhow, I get up there, and I jump up in the seat, and I'm looking in the mirrors, and I'm thinking, what the heck's going on? Couldn't get any radio stations. We were right out through the Dalles in that area. And so finally we get away from the river right there and get up on top, Boardman in that area, Pendleton, and we hear Mount Saint Helens.
So you guys were there when it happened?
We were there, and I mean, it just a big old cloud. A couple weeks earlier, we had unloaded right up around, I think of the towns. We usually had Portland, Vancouver, Longview, Astoria, and we went out along the side of the river where the road goes up like this on the Oregon side across from Washington, and there's cars lined up everywhere out there on the side of the road. What the heck's going on? And so I don't remember whether we stopped or we talked to somebody once we got to Astoria there to unload J.J. Newberry department stores. We did have other products other than the meat. And anyhow, he said, they're saying Mount Saint Helens is going up at 9 a.m. They were predicting this. It didn't. 2 weeks later, we're out there. It did go up. And then a week later, we had went from there when Carol was driving. We had went all the way to the East Coast, and a week later, we were right back out here, and it blew up again.
I mean, were you close enough to see the impact and the damage? The
cloud and everything. Okay. And then up by Spokane, that one went northeast, and so we were driving in ash.
Really?
They'd cleaned it off the road, but the sides of the road, the shoulders were 2-3 inches of ash. Yeah.
Wow.
So
that seems like that'd be pretty hard on your equipment.
It would be, exactly. I mean, if you didn't change air filters, it could be disastrous.
So Washington, Oregon's kind of one of the areas you like the most?
Exactly. And so anyhow, like I said, we were planning on going out this summer. And so that got postponed, and we wanted to rent a car and drive over and come up into Mount Saint Helens there, Centralia in that area, because Carol's from Centralia, Kansas. And so Centralia means something to her with Mount Saint Helens.
Have you guys ever thought about taking the same routes you did when you were driving, like in a car? Just kind of doing some road trips to kind of re-see some of the stuff at all? Or, I've already seen it, don't care, I'd go on there ever again.
And the thing is, times changed a lot, even from the time I started and Carol went with me till she got off the road. A lot of people just, probably doesn't even understand how this took place. But when we left Liberal, Kansas, we were 2-lane highway to Tucumcari. If I remember right, then there was a section of interstate done from Tucumcari to right on the east side of Albuquerque.
Where's Tucumcari at?
Tucumcari is right at 54 Junction and I-40.
Okay.
On the northern side of New Mexico.
Okay.
And then when you got ready to drop down the hill into Albuquerque, it was 2-lane highway. It's like, why would you not have started the interstate down there in Albuquerque? Then you got out to the west side of Albuquerque on the 2-lane, and then you went into Gallup, New Mexico. Grants might have been a section of interstate done, and then we went into Gallup, and you went right through Gallup, and you didn't want to be there on Friday nights. Everybody got their welfare checks on Friday afternoon, and I mean, it was just, it's 11 miles from one side of Gallup to the other side, and it'd take you an hour and a half, 2 hours to get through town. I mean, it was a mess.
Wow.
And then when you got into Arizona, you'd have a section of interstate, and then you'd be back on 2-lane, and one section going into from like up by Seligman to Kingman, Arizona, you ran through what was called the Indian Reservation. It was an Indian reservation, and it was 2-lane highway. And I mean, the reservation cops sat out there. You did not speed through their reservation. It was a money-making proposition.
That's just revenue, yeah.
Exactly, revenue. But you can't blame them either. No, by no means. And so then in 1970, right before I think I came back to Kansas in 77, they opened the stretch of interstate up around Kingman and to the east to join up. You didn't go through the reservation anymore. No, you did, because we were going through it at that time. It went somewhere just to the east side of town, maybe. I don't know. Excuse me. But Interstate 40, it's interstate all the way from Barstow to the East Coast. Interstate 70 is all the way from Baltimore to where it hits I-15 out in Utah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the roads you used to take, you don't even take them anymore.
Exactly. Well, even western Kansas and into Lyman. I don't remember. I know early 70s, that was an interstate. You went into Lyman and went right through town.
Huh.
Yep. Yeah, you didn't go up around the north side and come back.
Okay.
Yep.
Exactly.
Interesting. Man, you've seen a lot of changes on the interstate in the U.S.
The roads, and the funny thing is again, things come back around. You know, me working part time for Phillips Seed Farms out here in Assyria, I'm on 2-lane highways almost all the time.
Yep.
I love it.
So you're doing some of that now?
Yep.
Good.
Yep. I worked yesterday for them, and to me it doesn't seem like hard work. I get to go out and meet the farmers and everything, and I had a couple of new accounts this week, so that was kind of nice. And I went to Easton, Kansas, which sets up above Lawrence, up in there east of Valley Falls, Kansas, and went to that guy there, little bitty farm. And then I went down to Paola, south of Olathe. Yeah.
So you're just hauling seed to these guys?
Seed, or in this situation, both deliveries were deer products. They are in like deer minerals and stuff like that, and they feed the deer. And one of this one here I really love. I've delivered to him probably 8-10 times over the last 2.5 years. It's down by Fort Scott, Kansas. And one of the times I went in there, he goes, "I'm not going to be home, but the daughter can unload you." And so I get there, and here comes these two little girls out. One's about 10 years old, and one's about 13. And I thought, didn't have very much for them. I don't think she ran a forklift or a little tractor. I think we just took them off by hands, what we did. But anyhow, I looked at the little girl, and I said, "What do you do with all this?" It may have been the first time I went there because Dad wasn't there. And anyhow, she goes, "Well, we feed the deer, we kill the deer, and we eat the deer." I looked at her. I said,
Well, what do you think we do with this?
There you go.
"What are you, a dummy?"
Sounds like a 12-year-old boy working on the family farm, right?
And this is a girl, good-looking little girl, you know. And she was just grinning,
That's cool.
from ear to ear. It was kind of hilarious, really. But anyhow, one of my favorite saying about doing what I'm doing now is the people I work for in Assyria, they kind of treat me like an old man, you know, and I'm not saying that in a bad way.
I'm not sure why that.
They load my truck up, they fuel it up. If it's a little bit chilly outside, they start it up and warm it up before I come to work.
It's not a bad deal.
Do they help you get up and in the truck?
That's on my own.
Okay.
Oh,
And so, but anyhow, it kind of feels pretty good to actually be treated
That's pretty neat.
like that. And,
Well,
you know,
then they're appreciating you get out and doing what you're doing
exactly, you know, and I tell you what, it makes it easier to go to work when you enjoy working.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
yeah, man.
Right.
Well, appreciate you coming and just talking about your trucking experience. It's cool hearing, dude. That's a long haul.
Well,
And you're not done. You're still driving.
know, and the thing is, it's here and gone before you know it.
Huh.
I look back now and I think, how did I get 72 years old?
Your father's 98,
Yeah.
living where? Or?
He's in Via Christi out there in Hayes.
Okay.
So he's in assisted living. He's not in the long-term care. Just a real fast story about him and my boys. The oldest boy, he does construction work out in the mountains, and he was with FedEx Ground for several years in Illinois. You've met him, Rusty. And he's very smart, hands-wise, and carpenter work. I mean, he does top-notch work when it goes to construction. The middle boy is always been the more studious type. You know, he graduated out of high school, 4.0 student all the way through high school. Went out to K-State Salina, got his pilot license at 18, you know, and never flew again. I thought, Jeremy, I wanted to fly with you. Why'd you quit? Well, when he got his pilot license, then he was done there at K-State Salina, and he went into aeronautical engineering down at Wichita. Okay? Takes a smart person to do that.
Yeah.
So he stays in that about a year and a half, and he goes, well, Dad, I just don't think this is what I want to do. Okay. You know, I know you're smart enough. You're going to make the right decision. You're going to get where you belong one of these days. Ain't going to be no big deal. So then he goes into education. He graduates with a double major, math and history. And so anyhow, jump ahead a little bit. So he's a math and history teacher in a little bitty town in southern Kansas. And when he graduated out of Wichita State, he joined the Navy. And he was wanting to get into intelligence, is what he wanted. To use the mind and figure out what everybody else is going to do. I mean, you know a lot about that. And anyhow, that field was full, so his second choice was nuclear. So he went into being a nuclear, you can't call him engineer, but he was electrician's mate working on the nuclear reactors on the aircraft carrier Ronald Reagan. And so anyhow, he went in Great Lakes Naval Station, and it was 8 weeks or 10 weeks of basic training up there in that. And he was 24 years old. All these other kids are 18 years old right out of high school. And so they put you in groups. And he wasn't in the classic athletic group. He was in the group that was smart. You know what I'm saying? And so they chose him to be the team leader. And so they went through, and this captain that was in charge of him, he had never won. And he was an older fella. He had never won the Captain's Cup or whatever it was there at the basic training camp. Jeremy took these kids and, okay, this is what we do. This is what we do. You guys are better at this. You guys are better at that. And put kids in their spot. And they won the cotton picking or the Captain's Cup or whatever it was.
That's cool.
And then he went on to not Great Lakes. He went down to Charleston to the nuclear school. And that was like over a year and a half old, that school. So the commitment was a 6-year commitment in the Navy because you don't get on the ship till you're already 2 years in.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And so he graduated, I think, third in his class out of 200 students down at Charleston.
Wow.
Smart.
Wow.
That's,
yeah.
Okay? Back to the beginning of that story. One time we had a dinner out there, and Grandpa, my dad, you know, we were talking, him and Jeremy, and I said, Jeremy, I'm going to pat you on the back for everything you've done. I said, you are super smart, but I said, I'm going to tell you right now, my dad didn't get out of the 9th grade. Pappy said, you're a farmer. You've had enough school. Come home. Never went back to school.
That was common.
Yeah, that was common. And I said, I'm going to tell you one thing. Dad is still the smartest man I know.
Yeah.
To this day. And he's going to be 98.
And that's the guy you called when you needed to buy that first truck.
Yep.
Yeah. That was a respect.
Yep.
Yep.
Exactly.
Wow.
And the funny thing is, it's always came back. I'll try to make this fast, but it's always came back of, you know, Dad would call me and say, what do you think I ought to do here? What do you think I ought to do there? Especially in the trucking end of it. Not so much in the farming, but we always got along. I mean, it was always just easy-going, mutual conversation, and we worked on stuff. And so to this day, I got a great deal of respect for it.
You bet. Yeah.
You know?
And so that gives you good memories of
It does. And
your grandfather. What'd you call your grandfather?
Pappy.
Pappy. Okay.
And
you're Pappy now.
I'm the Pappy.
That's awesome.
And
that's a legacy right there.
It is. It's and it's funny. Dad didn't want to be called Pappy, and my brother didn't want to be called Pappy, and everything. But to me, it meant something.
You bet.
And but anyhow, Dad, probably the thing that I'll always remember about him, directly to me, was he goes, you know what? He said, if you want to go to college, I'll send you to a VOTEC. Specific, Colby, Beloit, something like that. Yeah. All those VOTEC schools were popping up everywhere. Yeah, work with your hands. And I thought, I just want to be a truck driver. And, now if I have any regret in life, I think the field that fascinates me the most that I think I could have done and would have liked it is electrical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I just always liked doing electrical stuff. But anyhow, here's what Dad told me. I said, no, I don't want to go to college. He said, one thing about you, you'll always know how to survive because you got common sense.
Yep.
You can't learn that in college at all.
Nope.
Yeah.
Can't teach it.
That's good.
Yep. Man. Well, again, we appreciate you coming on and sharing some stories. And,
this is fun. I enjoyed it.
Exactly.
I enjoyed this.
Yeah.
Cool.
It was.
Appreciate it.
Yep. There's a lot more. You can't remember everything, but at the same time, I enjoyed it up until probably about the last 5 or 6 years. And when you're driving down the interstate and you almost get run into for somebody passing you, or you're driving down the interstate and you're passing somebody and they're over here. And don't get me wrong, I've had headsets for years as far as talking on the phone. And most everybody does because it's a mandatory rule with a CDL. But they don't pay attention. They're just constantly
people texting
looking
on the phone.
down here on this phone.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
They're great. I mean, but at the same time, a lot of accidents has occurred because of them.
So I know we're ready to close it. One last question. Yeah. What do you think of self-driving trucks?
As much as I was against automatic trucks to start with, I'm not sure. I think I could sit there in my recliner.
Yeah. I don't even know if they have people in them, do they?
Well, some of them don't, but what's the difference between you and the military and you're flying this drone sitting at a desk?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they have people in them or not, or if they still have.
Some of them don't. Some of them
really.
Didn't. Walmart tried it, Budweiser ran from Fort Collins to St. Louis there 8-10 years ago. Yep.
I just don't trust the technology.
No, well, the problem is even to this day, and I don't care which cell network you have. We were Verizon for years, Kansas Cellular, Alltel, Verizon.
Yeah.
And we just changed to T-Mobile, and right in the house, I'm sitting there talking to somebody there yesterday, and all of a sudden, I have absolutely no signal at all, 8 miles from Salina.
And that's T-Mobile, everyone.
But then a lot of the areas where I was having trouble with Verizon, I'll have signal now.
Yeah.
It's like,
I know.
My wife was saying that yesterday.
Way.
We have Verizon. She goes, I was sitting here talking to the veterinarian, and I couldn't even hear him. I have to go outside.
Yep.
Exactly.
I know.
Exactly.
Thanks for sharing your story, Ron.
Well, thanks for coming over.
Yep.
Very fascinating.
This was good today.
Yep. Appreciate it.
Oh, man.
Thank you for listening to Incredibly Ordinary. If you want to hear more stories like the one you heard today, be sure to click the follow button so you can be notified when new episodes become available. For more information about today's episode, or if you have an amazing story to share, or want to feature your business on Incredibly Ordinary podcast, then we want to hear from you. Find our contact details in today's show notes and get in touch. Content here is for illustrative purposes and general information only. It is not legal, tax, or individualized financial advice, nor is it a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any specific security or engage in any specific trading strategy. Results will vary. Past performance is no indication of future results or success. market conditions change continuously. This commentary reflects the personal opinions, viewpoints, and analysis of Billings Group. It does not necessarily represent those of RFG Advisory, Private Client Services, their clients, or their employees. This commentary should not be regarded as a description of advisory services provided by Billings Group, or RFG Advisory, or performance returns of any client. The views reflected in the commentary are subject to change at any time without notice. Securities offered by registered representatives of Private Client Services, member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services offered by investment advisory representatives of RFG Advisory, a registered investment advisor. Private Client Services, Billings Group, and RFG Advisory are unaffiliated entities. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where RFG Advisory and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advisory services may be rendered by RFG Advisory unless a client agreement is in place.